Hey folks, Rex Bear here with Leak Project. Tonight's guest is Sandie Gustus. She is a leading authority in projection of consciousness. She has published numerous articles on consciousness, bioenergies, and related phenomena in the UK and internationally, and her most recent work, titled Less Incomplete, is available now on Amazon. She has trained for over 15 years and worked with Dr. Vieira, an icon in the field of OBEs, that could actually leave his body at will and astral project. Tonight, Sandie is going to discuss with us practical exercises anyone can do to experience an OBE. Leak Project brings you the cutting-edge, mind-over-matter power hour. Sandie, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to spend it with us here at the Leak Project. How are you doing?
Hi, Rex. I'm very well, thank you. And I'd like to start by thanking you so much for inviting me to join you here on the Leak Project. I'm always happy to have an opportunity to share some of the passion and energy that I have for these topics. So thank you for the invitation.
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly a pleasure. We've spoken with many people that study the OBE phenomenon, near-death experiences. I've always been a big fan of the astral projection phenomenon. So just really excited to hear what you bring to the table. And it just seems like you've got a really good understanding and ability to actually do some of these things. So I was hoping you could discuss with our audience at first just a little bit about yourself and why you decided to get into this path.
Yes. I first came across these ideas when I was working in Geneva. As you mentioned in the introduction, I was working with the UN. And to go back a little further, I was actually brought up in Australia. I'm Australian, in a Catholic environment, and I can say, looking back, that during my upbringing, these ideas around religion didn't really resonate with me. I didn't really feel any kind of connection as such. And then after I finished university, Rex, I started traveling. I've been traveling and working in many different countries, and this experience really exposed me to different ideas, different thought systems, belief systems, and so on. I studied meditation, transcendental meditation, when I was in Dubai. I studied Reiki in Singapore and started to have my first experiences with energy. And then coming back to what I was saying, when I was in Geneva, I came across what was then known as the International Institute of Projectiology and Conscientiology, later became the IEC in London. And they were studying these ideas around consciousness and out-of-body experience and so on. And I distinctly remember feeling at that time, after having done the foundation course there, which was very comprehensive, a mixture of theory and practice, 40 hours in total. I remember going away thinking, I've never heard so much common sense in my life. So it really, for me, clarified so many questions that probably many of us have about our broader reality. And I also very much appreciated their approach to the work, their principles, so that's how I first became involved with this work.
Now, how old were you when you had your first out-of-body experience?
Well, it's a good question. I look back now, and I remember having experiences when I was very young. I can't say exactly how old I was, but I was very young. I would say between the ages of 4 and 6. And what was curious about those experiences was there was a pattern. And the pattern was I only had those experiences when I was ill. And you know, when you're children, you have mumps and measles and all sorts of different illnesses where you have a temperature. And I now know that having a temperature puts you into some kind of altered state of consciousness, that being any state of consciousness which is outside of your normal waking state. And when you're in an altered state of consciousness, you're more easily able to access another altered state of consciousness, which an OBE is. And so this was happening to me when I was young, and the experiences were so far out of my frame of reference, I could not even articulate to myself at that age what was happening to me. And so, of course, I never discussed that with my family. No one else was ever talking about these ideas. But what I was experiencing, knowing what I now know, was the sensations associated with the takeoff of the astral body from the physical body. So I was experiencing some, undulation. You feel this rocking of the astral body as it starts to take off. I was experiencing this ballooning sensation where you feel yourself to be puffing up, if you like, growing, expanding, becoming so much bigger than you actually are. I experienced some numbness of the physical body, and all of these sensations are very common and very typical of the takeoff when you're having an out-of-body experience. And then I would find myself, this is the way I described it to myself, I guess, when I was that age, in the night sky. So this is when I first started having my own OBEs. And then, as is quite common with children, if there's no discussion around these things, they're not hearing that anybody else is sharing these experiences, they tend to go away and people become very absorbed in their physical reality. I do remember, though, several years later when I was around maybe 12 or 13, one of the kids at school coming to school one day and saying that he'd left his body during the night and that he'd passed through walls in his house and through the roof and so on. And I remember the kids, what children are like, really ribbing him about that, absolutely ridiculing him. But I remember thinking, I know what he's saying is true. And so I started trying again to have these experiences at that age, but nothing happened. But then when I started studying at the IEC in London, I started having out-of-body experiences. Of course, we learn techniques, we learn how to work with our energy, the things that facilitate these experiences happening. And I started to have out-of-body experiences again. And I don't know if you've had a lucid OBE yourself, but really it just takes that one experience for you to know in a way that you can never again deny to yourself that you are something more than the physical body. So that happened to me, and it was very impactful.
The first time I remember vividly having an OBE experience was when I was going to sleep, and I think I was about 27 at the time, maybe a little bit older, and it scared me so bad that I woke myself back up. And then as I started to fall asleep, I did it again. I floated out of my body, and it spooked me pretty bad at the time. I thought to myself, okay, maybe a spirit or an entity will latch on, or I'll get possessed or something like that, just because I was ignorant on the subject at the time. And since then, it's really opened my eyes and expanded my mind to the point to where I've done a lot of research and studying. I picked up a book called Mastering Astral Projection, and it teaches you how to basically step-by-step guide on how to effectively have an out-of-body experience. And what you describe as the feelings and the sensations, I certainly remember those when I was trying to do it on purpose and make it happen. But I think that those were probably the most aha moments, some of the most aha moments I've ever had in my life. And yeah, it's just remarkable. Why did you put together the book Less Incomplete? Because that's just a fascinating work.
Yes, I'll explain why I put it together, but perhaps I can just start by telling the readers what it's about, if okay with you.
Perfect.
So the book summarises 40 years of scientific research into the consciousness by a Brazilian conscious researcher by the name of Dr. Waldo Vieira. And Dr. Vieira actually passed away last year at the age of 83. He had been having lucid projections since the age of 9. So you can imagine he had lucid out-of-body experiences for 74 years, and it accumulated an incredible amount of experience. So he was one of the world's most prolific astral travellers and was able to produce OBEs at will. Of course, there are many other people in this field of work who can do that. So my book presents two new sciences proposed by Dr. Vieira. We're going to use some more big words here, Rex. I noticed you having a little bit of difficulty pronouncing the name of the organisation I currently volunteer with, but not to worry about the big words. I'll explain them as we go along. So my book presents two new sciences proposed by Dr. Vieira. The first is conscientiology. It's the study of the consciousness. And the second science is called projectiology, which is the study of the projection of the consciousness or out-of-body experience and bioenergies. And when I use the word consciousness, I use it as a synonym of soul or spirit or self. So essentially, it is us. The individual consciousness is me or you. And what's new about these sciences is that, unlike conventional science, they acknowledge that our reality extends beyond what we can perceive with our 5 physical senses and beyond this one physical life. So in my book, I explain the key concepts of these two sciences, including many factors that influence our lives on a daily basis that are currently outside of the awareness of most people. So things like non-physical dimensions, non-physical people, past lives, karma, bioenergy, the connection between bioenergy and our ability to control some psychic phenomena, etc. These are some of the theoretical topics I explore in the book. But I also show the readers how to apply this knowledge for their own benefit, explaining things like how you can, of course, have lucid OBEs, how you can identify your purpose in life, how you can recall past lives, some of your past lives, how you can use energy as a form of healing for yourself and others, how you can develop your psychism, how you can attract more positive physical and non-physical people to you, how you can communicate with non-physical individuals, etc. So in summary, the book helps the readers to really understand their life within this broader context that includes a multidimensional, multi-serial reality. When I say multi-serial, I'm referring to this series of successive lives that we all undergo. And the book teaches the readers some skills to enhance their psychic abilities so as they can have their own direct experiences of this broader reality, which, is, for me, for conscientiology, a very much a principle of our work, making sure that people can have their own experiences of these things. In terms of the first question you asked me, just to go back to that, what inspired me to write the book? Why did I do that? Well, as you mentioned in the introduction, I've been a student, a volunteer and an instructor with organisations associated with Dr. Vieira's work for 15 years now. And in the very beginning, over those first few years, I started to see that Dr. Vieira's own books, which explain his research and his whole process for understanding the consciousness, were very academic in nature. In fact, he's quite infamous for that. He uses a lot of neologisms and terminology that would be unfamiliar to people who hadn't studied with these organisations. But of course, the ideas themselves are incredible, life-changing for many people. So I decided to write a book that would be a popular as opposed to scientific account of Dr. Vieira's work. And my aim was to provide a summary of the key ideas of his research that would be accessible to a non-academic audience without dumbing down the information in any way, so as anyone interested in the ideas could benefit from them in the way that I had. So that's why I wrote the book. That was my inspiration.
Well, and the picture of him that I saw on the website, he's got that long white beard. He's wearing all white clothes, and it's got a pretty cool energy. Did he always dress in white like that?
He always dressed in white like that. He says that it's easier to move energy around in white than in the darker colours. And it's funny that you mentioned that photo because, he was always poking fun at himself, and he used to say, beware, I'm an old man with a long white beard and I believe in past lives, beware of me, I might be crazy. So he really didn't take himself too seriously, but he was a real character.
And so you learned a lot from him then, directly?
No, not from him, because he was based in Brazil.
Okay.
So what happened was he started several organisations, but at a certain point in time, he started this scientific research and educational organisation called the International Institute of Projectiology and Conscientiology. And it was a way of formalising training around these ideas, the theory and the practice. And so this organisation became quite big in Brazil. And then at a certain point in time, they decided to expand internationally, which happened. And that's when I joined them in London, moved from Geneva to join the IAPC. They'd opened an office in London. And then just a couple of years later, the IIPC became the offices outside of Brazil, formed a separate organisation called the International Academy of Consciousness. So this is where I trained as a student, where I became a volunteer and an instructor. But I've been to Dr. Vieira's research campus in Brazil a few times, of course, and met with him and availed myself of all of the learning opportunities there, including there's about 20 laboratories there as well, and many other activities.
Well, I'm certainly getting this sensation of deja vu right now, looking at this picture of him on your website, sandiegustus.com. That's pretty awesome. And another thing that I'd like to ask you about being an instructor, when you teach somebody the ability to have an OBE at will, let's say, I mean, it's certainly just an incredible opportunity to have that amazing skill. So I've seen but listened to the Monroe Institute series that they have, all those DVDs and CDs and MP3s, and they're pretty cool. They got some neat beats and stuff like that, but they never really took me over the edge as much as just some of the exercises have in books that I've read. How do you explain and describe to people the best way to, maybe here's a 5-minute or 10-minute, 15-minute sit down, and here's the way to exercise your abilities to have these experiences?
Yes, well, the thing is that the ability to have a lucid OBE is different for everybody. And it can depend on lots of different factors. Whether you're able to do that easily or whether that's difficult for you depends on different factors. A real key to being able to leave the body is being able to move your energies. We all have an energy body. We have these little vortexes in the energy body known as chakras. I'm sure you're familiar with that term, as most of your listeners will be. And so if you have a blockage in any one of your chakras, this can stop you from leaving the body. So let's just say, for example, you have a broken heart. You've broken up with your partner. You're very upset about that. You're hanging on to that. You have a lot of angst, a lot of grief, a lot of heartache, and so on. You might have a blockage in your cardio chakra. This could stop you from leaving the body. Sometimes people might have more long-term blockages in any one of their chakras. This can stop them from leaving the body. So when we start working with energies and when we start discussing in our classes all of these ideas around conscientiology and projectiology, people can start to identify perhaps what are some of the issues that are stopping them from leaving the body. And of course, we always did a lot of practical training, and in that training, people start to get some ideas, some insights into maybe what is stopping them from leaving the body. And great, then it's all a learning experience. They can then go and address that issue. For some people, they just seem to have a natural ability to leave the body. They're very unblocked. It could be that they were lucid projectors in a past life, many past lives, so they already have a lot of familiarity and experience with that, so it comes very easily. But for other people, learning that really from scratch, perhaps considering that they have had no previous psychic ability, it could be equivalent to, say, learning a new foreign language or a new musical instrument, for example. There will be a lot of practice, a lot of time, dedication and effort involved. But really, I think it's possible for anybody to achieve results. In terms of how to do it, there are lots of techniques for leaving the body. I think, you were talking about the different DVDs and MP3s that you've listened to and worked with yourself. I think the ideal, really, that we would all be aiming for is to be able to have a lucid out-of-body experience even without using any kind of prop or technique. Ideally, we don't want to be dependent on anything like that. But of course, it's not so straightforward. So I think people listening tonight, the best thing to do would be to pick up a book, find some techniques, practice the different techniques. I describe 6 very good techniques in my book. There's also a book by Waldo Vieira. He has 38 techniques in that book. The idea would be, don't be in a rush. Grab a technique that seems to resonate with you in some way. So, for example, if you're someone who has a good lung capacity, perhaps you will go with a technique around breathing. If you are someone who has a good imagination or level of creativity, a visualization technique would work well for you. So go for a technique that seems to resonate with you, and I would recommend you practice that technique every night for 30 nights. To really see, you've got to give it an opportunity to work. You have to give your energy body, your astral body, an opportunity to adapt to what's being required of it. And the other thing is, when you lie down to try a technique, don't just try for 15 minutes and then nothing happens, give up. You need to be patient, hang in there. It may be that you leave the body after 60 minutes, 75 minutes. But if you don't have the patience to wait that long, you will never know. So it can, it takes some time. This is not something for most people that's going to happen on the first try or the third try or the fourth try. There's some dedication involved and needed for that.
Now, could you describe maybe one exercise to our listeners that you would use to help get to that next level?
Yes, I can. I think one of the technique that can really work well for a lot of people is one of the techniques I describe in my book. It's called the mental saturation technique. And I'm choosing this one because I think it's probably unlikely that your listeners have heard of this somewhere else. It's a bit different. The way it works is you immerse yourself in these ideas, out-of-body experience, psychism, and so on, every way you can. Think about OBEs at every opportunity. Practice as many different techniques as you can. Read books, listen to radio interviews, watch TV programs, join a meetup group, find like-minded people to talk to and share your experiences with. Put pictures of OBEs on the walls in your bedroom where you'll be projecting from. Keep a diary next to your bed where you can note down what happened during the night, be it a dream, an OBE, or another psychic experience. And also constantly ask yourself the question, what is going on non-physically here? If you're in your office, in your home, in the supermarket, wherever you might be, what is going on non-physically here? What is going on behind the scenes? And in this way, you're totally saturating your mind with the idea of being out of the body and experiencing the non-physical dimension. Hopefully then, when you go to sleep at night, your mind is still, saturated with these thoughts, and you will leave the body. You will go there. So this is a technique that can have good results for a lot of people. A small caveat to this recommendation of this technique is that, of course, when deciding where to study, who to talk to, what books to read, etc., use your discernment. You have to be discerning. But perhaps, Rex, I can explain another technique that might be easier for people. It's called the psychophysiological self-relaxation technique. And so it's a technique that puts you into a very, very deep state of relaxation. And so, of course, if you're going to leave the body, you have to be able to forget about the physical body. So being in a very deeply relaxed state is a prerequisite for being able to do this. So with the psychophysiological self-relaxation technique, it's very easy. what you do is you take a deep breath in, you hold your breath for 5 seconds, and while you're holding your breath, you contract your muscles. Let's start in the head area. So you could start with your forehead. So you're going to crinkle your forehead and hold your muscles contracted like that for 5 seconds, and then relax your muscles and breathe out. And then you breathe in again, and then you go down to, let's say, your eyes. You squeeze your eyes tightly shut, hold your breath for 5 seconds, and then relax and open your eyes. And you move slowly over your whole body, bit by bit, not rushing, taking your time, systematically contracting and relaxing all of your muscle groups along your arms, your legs, your chest, your back, and so on. And what happens when you apply this technique is that you are able to release any tension in your muscles that you might be holding that you're not aware of, and you will achieve a very deep state of relaxation. Often I find what happens after applying this technique, and this is certainly also the experience of a lot of students I've worked with, when you complete this technique, you might find that your whole body is numb. So you can't feel your body. My experience is normally when I'm trying to leave the body, I lie with my hands resting on my hips. But after I've applied this psychophysiological self-relaxation technique, I can't feel my hands on my hips anymore. I don't really know, did I leave them on my hips? Are they lying by my body? My whole body's numb. And so as we were mentioning earlier, this is one of those common sensations that lets us know that the astral body is starting to detach. And when you feel that, the idea is you think of your target, where you want to go outside of the body, and you should plan this in advance, focus on that, and hopefully that will be enough for you to leave the body and go to your target. So there are a couple of techniques, different techniques.
Yeah, absolutely great. And the first one you brought up kind of reminded me of somebody that's really wanting to, like they're training, like a training camp or something for martial arts, or they're going to race in the Tour de France or something like that. They're really just engulfing themselves, every aspect to get to that next level and be elite at it. And I think that's amazing. If you could really have the opportunity to travel at will, OBE type experiences, I mean, I can't think of anything much cooler than that. That's truly like being a Jedi. So let me ask you this. Have you gotten how far out there have you gone, Sandie, in your personal experiences that you've had?
I've had some different experiences outside of the body, and they definitely kind of increased in terms of the level of complexity as time went by, and in terms of the level of study that I had done and my own understanding and so on. So just to give you a couple of examples, when I first started studying at the IEC, I really hadn't had an out-of-body experience since I was very, very young, as I mentioned earlier in the interview. And then all of a sudden one night, I found myself out of the body. What kind of surprised me about it was I was surprised at how clear the experience was to me. And of course, a lot of it had to do with, my study and my learning and my understanding and knowledge and so on. But I was 100% sure I was outside of the body. I knew exactly what was going on. I knew I wasn't having a dream or a traveling clairvoyance or any other type of experience. And so I kind of immediately reverted back to my studies, what I was learning in class, to really prove this experience to myself. And one of the ways that we can prove that we're really having an out-of-body experience is when you have a lucid OBE, you can exercise your free will. You're in control of that experience. You can decide where to go and what you want to do. So I was doing very simple things, really, like I was actually at that time hovering above a beach, and I decided I wanted to travel out over the water, and then I wanted to go higher up into the air and then go and stand back down on the beach. So I was just doing things like this to really show myself, yes, this is an OBE, I'm in control of this experience, what we learn in class is true, and so on. And then I can explain two more experiences that I had. I had another very interesting experience that taught me something about how we communicate with others outside of the body, because when we're outside of the body, we actually communicate with our energy. Our energy is inextricably linked to our thoughts and our emotions, our intentions, ideas and sentiments and so on. So when you meet someone else outside of the body, you don't even have to talk. You can immediately understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling and so on. So one night I was actually staying with some friends, and I was in a small bedroom, and the bed was pushed right up next to the wall. There was a huge window on the wall, and there was no curtains or coverings on the window. And I woke up this one night, and I wasn't that far out of the body, but I was very lucid. And all of a sudden I noticed there was like a crowd of people peering in the window, you know, with their hands wrapped around their faces, peering in the window, looking at me. And they were non-physical people. I knew that they were non-physical people. And my first thought was, if this happened in, you know, physically, if these were physical people, I'd be terrified to wake up in the night and see all of these people just on the other side of the window looking at me. But what I sensed in the energy of this group of people was they weren't there to harm me in any way. They weren't there to disturb me. They were just curious. They were just looking. And I actually discussed this experience with some colleagues of mine at the IEC, and we were wondering and hypothesising who these non-physical people were. And we concluded that it could be, as the house was for sale where I was staying, these could have been the non-physical company, if you like, of people who were thinking of buying the house, coming to check out the house in the way that the physical buyers come to check out the house. Is this going to be where we live next? So it's a hypothesis in the pending file, still waiting to be verified. But Rex, to tell you about one of the more interesting experiences that I've ever had, really, one night I found myself out of the body projected, and I was in a classroom environment, and it was more like a lecture, if you like. There was a lot of people there, and then I was, you know, quite down the back of the room, and I noticed that a colleague of mine from the IAC was also there, a very experienced instructor, and I was very happy to see his silver cord and to know that he was still connected to his physical body. He hadn't passed away since the last time I'd seen him. So he was also projected there, and he was actually giving the class. And what were they discussing? He was teaching that room full of people about what it is to have a physical body, what it is to live in the physical environment. And he was showing them, look, I have this silver cord, it attaches me to the physical body. So when I'm physical, I can leave the body and come back to the non-physical dimension to visit. So I found that experience absolutely fascinating because, of course, a big part of my life over the last 15 years or so has really been revolving around educating people who are interested about the non-physical dimension, non-physical people, how we communicate with them, how we have an out-of-body experience and so on. And then, of course, I understand that this is also happening in the non-physical dimension. These are people in the period between their physical lives, perhaps preparing for their next physical life, trying to understand what it's going to be like. And of course, it's quite something for them to wrap their heads around, as it is for us, but different for them, because when they're in the non-physical dimension, are thinking about existing in the physical dimension is a much more restricted environment. We can't here in our physical bodies just think of any place and in an amount of time equivalent to some seconds be there. We can't pass through walls. We can't communicate through our energy. So, it's more difficult for them to kind of come to terms with that, if you like. It's easier for us going in the other direction. If you understand what I mean, we will, when we die, be going to a less restricted, less limited environment.
It's interesting because I often sense a, behind the scenes presence as, especially the way that the world turns. You look at the global scale, the agendas of these, corporations and politicians, and the way that everything kind of weaves together. And I sometimes feel that there's something behind the scenes pulling the strings, like not physically, but non-physically. Do you sense that, or have you ever encountered or heard about an encounter that discusses those types of, maybe parasitic, archonic type entities that latch on to people physically?
Yes, that's definitely the case. We can say that for everything that's going on physically, as you have rightfully experienced, there is something going on, behind the scenes. There is a backstage, if you like, to our existence. According to Dr. Vieira's research, and of course, no one ever managed to do a census of the non-physical environment, but his feeling, his idea, the best that he could measure really was that for every one physical person, there are around 9 non-physical people. And depending on their level of lucidity, some of those, people who are non-physical in a very lucid state are actively involved in, helping other people out, physical and non-physical. And then you can have look, it's just like Rex, human nature is human nature everywhere we go, in the same way that we have physical people who are not well intentioned, who are difficult. We have terrorists here, we have murderers, we have pedophiles, we have all of this. Of course, we have all of this in the non-physical dimension as well. We have war in the non-physical dimension. All of these things exist. And so I'm sure you're familiar with this law that is known as, like attracts like. So, of course, people who are involved in activities that are not ethical in the physical environment will attract like-minded people who are non-physical, who will get involved, give them ideas, suggestions through telepathy, and so on and so on. So this is definitely going on. I don't want people to be alarmed to hear about that. And, this is one of the reasons why at the IEC and other organisations associated with Dr. Vieira's work, the educational courses are comprehensive because, these are serious topics. We teach people the theory, what is actually going on, but also we're teaching them how to deal with situations where, for example, you might have someone around you who's not positive, causing you some issues, and that can happen for all sorts of different reasons. But we learn in working with our energies how to build a kind of energetic shield around us. We learn how to be conscious of our thoughts so as we're not attracting people to us who are not ethical, and so on. So yes, that's definitely going on, but there's really nothing for people to fear, in the same way that, we know what's going on in the world today. I'm living here in Paris. We had terrible terrorist attacks back in November. Again, attacks in Belgium just a couple of weeks ago. But it doesn't
Sandie,
stop us from... Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to ask you real quick, because I haven't talked to anybody that lives out there and had to go through that experience. What was it like in Paris after the Bataclan attacks?
I think the Parisians were very shaken by that. I can say some people definitely traumatized. If you've been living I know someone who was living in the neighborhood of the theater where the concert took place. It was a place he'd gone to regularly throughout his life. He was very, very deeply affected by that. I think people were also very spooked. Of course, you feel nervous doing your commute to work in the morning, as I do, going out to the La Défense area, which is the city, the business district, and coming back in the evenings. The trains are packed and so on. But I think, the human spirit is very resilient. People realise we have to keep going about our lives, and the security was definitely stepped up to a very high level. A lot of army personnel very visible in the city and around, and of course this is very, very reassuring. But of course it's something that we feel like we live with these days, and we never really know what's going to happen next. Europe is certainly a target at the moment, as you can see. There were the attacks in London in 2007, I think it was, now Paris and Brussels. And, of course, these are the things that are actually coming to pass. And there are other plans that are thwarted by the police and don't happen. So it's something we're living with these days.
Have there been a lot of refugees coming into Paris over the past few years?
Yes, and definitely, we have a lot of people from Syria here. A lot of them, of course, are making the journey up to Calais to try to get across to the UK. And you probably know there's the huge camp there in Calais, the refugee camp. Mm-hmm. There in Calais, but we definitely see them on the streets in Paris, and it's very, very difficult to see. These are people who, through no fault of their own, had to leave their own country, and they're there on the streets with very young children, and it's heartbreaking.
So you see a lot of that then, just families and...
Yes, and I think probably I see quite a few, because they tend to, a lot of them tend to head out to the city area, which is where the businesses are, because this is where, the money is. So they're sitting out there and begging in the metro station and around the La Grande Arche, which is the big monument there at La Défense.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't mean to digress, and I change the subject there. I appreciate that. So let's get back into the OBE phenomenon, if we may, and the projection of consciousness. There's the real time zone and then different astral levels. From what I've read and some of the experiences that I've had, they seem more kind of like patterns and shapes and such, and not really what we would think of as, looking at stuff like we are now or whatever. It's more kind of like shapes and patterns and connections and stuff like that. Do you think that there's a difference between the real time zone and astral projection, or out of body experiences and astral projection, or do you kind of label it and connect it all the same?
I think people experience time in a different way outside of the body. So, for example, you could go and have a projection and have the feeling that you've been out of the body for some hours because so many things happened, and you come back to the body and find that perhaps only 20 minutes has passed. This is one thing. And then in terms of how we perceive things outside of the body, there is a zone, if you like, very, very close to the Earth's crust. We call it the paratroposphere, or the crustal dimension. And the energies there are very dense, if you like. And so what happens is, if you project to that crustal dimension, things are almost the same as the physical dimension. It's a kind of a replica of the physical dimension, but there are some small differences as well. So this is something that can become confusing for projectors, because they find themselves in an environment or a location that's familiar to them. It looks the same, but it's not quite the same. So I'll give you an example. A friend of mine recounted an experience in which he floated up outside of his body one night, straight through the roof of his house at home. And when he made it through the roof, he was looking down on the field next to the house, which was usually empty, but he noticed that there was a kind of an office block there, which is not usually there. So then this is what prompted him to realise, I'm actually out of the body, and I'm in the crustal dimension, because I'm seeing a different kind of form, if you like, of the variation, if you like, of the physical dimension. And then the other thing to note about your question, Rex, is that when we're outside of the body, it's not a question of being 100% lucid, we're sure we're out of the body, or, we're dreaming. It's not one or the other. Our lucidity varies across the whole spectrum when we're outside of the body. So sometimes, as I mentioned, you can be 100% sure you're outside of the body. You can prove that. You might be able to see your physical body. You might be able to pass your non-physical hands through one another, do different things so as you're sure of your condition. But then other times you might have some lucidity, but not enough to know that you're projected. You can perceive things around you, maybe non-physical individuals, but as you were mentioning, then they're kind of hazy forms. You can't really decipher exactly what that is. It might be more of a dreamlike experience. So I think this is something very interesting for your listeners to understand. You can really have that whole spectrum of lucidity outside of the body. But look, it's not really surprising because we have that in our physical lives as well. Some days you're on fire, you're multitasking, you're creative, you're very clear in your mind, you're organised. Other days, you can't get started without having a cup of coffee. So the same thing happens in the non-physical dimension as well. And, this is all part of the process of practicing having your out-of-body experiences. It's not just a matter of getting out of the body. It's a matter of having a good level of lucidity when you're outside of the body as well. But I think what's interesting also for people to know is that, in fact, we are all out of the body every night when we're asleep. What happens is the astral body detaches slightly from the physical body and floats some 6-7 inches above the physical body. It's an out-of-body experience, but the reality is that people are in an unconscious state. They're sleeping outside of the body. So, of course, when they wake up in the morning, they don't know that is happening. But we know that this is happening because those people who are lucid, when they're leaving the body and coming back to the body, they see their partners in bed, their kids in the next room, even their pets projected in this condition just slightly outside of the body and asleep. So that's a kind of very roundabout way of answering your question. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. And, the different entities behind the scenes, have you ever actually seen something that wasn't human or animal-like, but I guess you could say outer worldly?
I haven't seen myself, but I can tell you a very interesting story. Dr. Vieira met several times during his experiences outside of the body a non-physical being who had never been human before. I know this is getting into the realms of, it sounds incredulous. So for sure, I'm not asking anyone to believe what I'm saying here. I'm telling this story that I know, but of course we all have to have our own experiences to know what's real and what's not real. Anyway, Dr. Vieira was meeting this non-physical person outside of the body who had never been human before. So it's what we would call an extraterrestrial. And so he started, this consciousness was very intelligent, and the discussion was this ET, if you like, was preparing to have his very first physical incarnation. And so he asked Dr. Vieira if it would be possible, if Dr. Vieira would permit him to possess his body from time to time. Of course, Dr. Vieira, would understand when that was going to happen, to allow him to become accustomed to operating the physical body, if you like. Even this ET's vision was different. He had one eye, but his vision was completely different to ours. So he wanted to see, how does the sight work? How do I move the body? What is it like to have 2 arms and 2 legs? And so this relationship actually went on for quite some years, and then he informed Dr. Vieira that he was about to be born in Finland. And so that was the end of the relationship. He never saw him again outside of the body, understanding he'd been born in Finland. And at that time, I was working with the IAC, and we started giving courses in Finland. And we were hoping that, we'd be well established there. And in the years to come, that this ET would find his way to our organisation and to be able to, reconnect in some way with Dr. Vieira, the ideas, and really understand this experience that he'd been through.
That's incredible. Now, another thing too with the NDE phenomenon, how much research have you done with near-death experiences?
I haven't researched the near-death experience myself, but our understanding, of course, is that it is a type of forced out-of-body experience, and I think it's it's fascinating from the research perspective, because, of course, what happens in an NDE, what can happen during an NDE, is that the person is declared clinically dead, so they meet all of the clinical criteria for death. They have dilated pupils, there's no respiration, there's no pulse, and so on. They are later revived, and then when they're revived, they start recounting not only what happened non-physically during this time that they were supposedly dead, but also what was going on around the body, around their body physically. Often people are very accurately able to describe their own resuscitation scene. So I think the research into the NDE is really a way for science to demonstrate that the consciousness is not, it is not a function of the physical brain, and that therefore our reality, our existence, extends beyond the physical body, beyond our physical dimension. So I'm full of admiration and respect for all of the people who are researching the near-death experience, particularly Professor Peter Fenwick, of course, who was really leading the way in this research for so many years.
I've heard too that a lot of people will hear what sounds like trumpets and stuff, but some speculate that what they're actually hearing is just a higher level of consciousness and different vibrational frequencies to create that type of sound.
Yes, I don't know. I haven't heard that myself. One interesting thing I can say, I don't know how relevant it is or not, but sometimes when we leave the body, one of those, remember we were talking earlier of the sensations that you can have when you leave the body, the numbness, the tingling, the ballooning and so on. Another quite common sensation is what we call intracranial sounds. They're sounds that seem to stem from inside the brain itself, strangely enough, at the moment of the separation from the physical body. So I don't know if maybe that's got something to do with it or not. I really don't know.
Now, do you think that it's possible to make contact with deceased relatives in the astral realms?
Yes, I do. This is possible. I think if people want to do that, they could then use that person that they would like to meet as the target of their projection. So we were talking before, like any technique that you use to try to leave the body should include a clearly defined target. So when you start to feel yourself leaving the body, you focus on that target and off you go. If you don't know where you want to go outside of the body, of course, it's less likely that it's going to happen. So if someone would like to meet a former relative or friend who's passed away, use that person as your target. And, I think this is definitely one of the benefits of being able to have lucid out-of-body experiences, because sometimes a person passes away and there might be someone might have unfinished business with that person. The karma is not settled. And so it's an ideal opportunity to meet with that person again, perhaps say some of the things that you never had the courage to say or thought to say or had the opportunity to say, or to discuss some difficulties that passed between you and settle your karma. This is really important because if we have kind of outstanding karmic debts with people, things that are not resolved between us, then this will have to be addressed at some point in time in a future life. So it's also a good kind of life lesson, if you like. It's a good reason to think about all of the relationships that we have with all of the people around us, and try to keep them on an even keel and to resolve the difficulties when they occur and keep your relationships positive.
Absolutely. Very wise words. Now, your book, Less Incomplete, is available on Amazon. I don't know if it's available on your website, sandiegustus.com also?
I'm not selling it directly from my website, but there are links from my website to Amazon. So I think Amazon's probably the easiest way to get it. Or alternatively, people can find the ISBN code on Amazon and they can go into any bookstore with the ISBN code and give it to the bookseller, and it can be ordered. So that's another way for people who are interested in my book to get a copy.
Oh, that's great. Now, let me ask you, Sandie, what's next for you?
Well, I have a couple of things going on at the moment. As you mentioned in the introduction, I started volunteering a couple of years ago with an organisation in Brazil called the Interassistential Services for the Internationalisation of Conscientiology. I know it's rather a long-winded name, but as the name suggests, its aim is to help the 20 or so organisations associated with Dr. Vieira's work and principles to expand internationally. It's working to help them to hold activities in countries outside of Brazil. And these organisations, Rex, are super interesting. Many of them specialise in a particular area of research. So, for example, one focuses on health from a multidimensional perspective. So, for example, you can go to this organisation and have what we call conscientiotherapy. So you can go along with an issue that's troubling you, and the counsellors there, who are qualified and practicing medical doctors, psychologists and psychiatrists, can counsel you and treat you, but from a multidimensional, multi-serial perspective. So you might have some issue that you're dealing with that actually had its roots in a past life, or maybe it's a result of an attachment that a non-physical individual has with you. So that's one of the organisations. There's another one solely dedicated to researching our purpose in life, the life plan. Another one researches past lives, how to recall them, and even how to identify a previous personality that you may have been. So I'm working with this organisation, and the second thing I'm working on is to try to organise some activities here in Paris. So my book's actually going to be translated and published in French in September. So I'm currently working with some colleagues as we'd like to try to organise some courses here in France, and of course we would like to aim to give those courses in French as well. Nothing's finalised as of right now, but if anyone listening might be interested to study with us, please do contact me via my website or my Facebook page, and I can certainly keep you informed and up to date. And for your listeners in Canada, the French translation will also be available in Canada later this year.
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'd like to thank our listeners for joining us tonight here at the Leak Project. Make sure to check out Sandie's work at sandie-gustus.com. It's soon just going to be sandiegustus.com. Also, Less Incomplete on Amazon. Just an awesome book. So, Sandie, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it, and you have a fantastic afternoon.
Thank you, Rex. Thanks so much for having me on. It's my pleasure.